I'd like to say hello and welcome to the DLE Breakfast Club on this absolutely beautiful August 14th. For those that are new to the program, the DLE Breakfast Club is a business-oriented roundtable to present and exchange soft skills that are valuable in the workplace. As always, we have people from differing backgrounds to provide unique perspectives. Breakfast Club aims to address and identify experts in their respective industries and have them share their skills with others. To cover a few ground rules, please keep yourself muted if you're not talking, and please take advantage of the chat. Throughout the conversation, we'll be seeding questions from the chat, and we encourage you to converse within it. Today, we're lucky enough to be joined by Andrew Diamond, who was able to present a gem of an idea in his job. Andrew is a 2011 DLE alum and a Syracuse University graduate with a BS in sports management. With 10 years of experience in the industry and stints served at Octagon, Fox Sports, MLB Advanced Media, The Topps Company, FanDuel, and with his most current position at SiriusXM as a manager of sports partnership and content marketing, Andrew lines himself up to be an expert at both crafting and presenting big ideas. His hobbies include writing, biking, meditation, fantasy sports, and even real sports when a pandemic's not going on. He'll be interviewed today by John Katz. John, a graduate of Springfield College with a BS in marketing and a minor in entrepreneurship, certainly puts that minor to good use. An entrepreneur himself, John is the creator of Blendy, a portable blender that he created in his own dorm room. He's also a financial advisor at Raymond James and has been interested in financial markets since he was a teen. John will be taking us through a few questions with Andrew about his big idea and how he presented it. And after, we'll transition into our normal roundtable where you'll be able to ask Andrew questions and discuss refining and perfecting your big ideas. John, please take us away.
Cool. All right, Andrew, how are you doing?
Pretty good. How's everybody this morning?
Good, very good. So I wanted to start out because, in preparing for this, you had a very interesting story about how you got to Sirius. So I kind of wanted you to take the floor and say how you got here and how your love for baseball has come over the years.
Yeah, sure. So kind of always grew up with a huge passion for sports, which led me to pursuing sports management at Syracuse University. While I was in school, every summer I did an internship with a sports-related, company or something in the field, except for one year where I went to South Africa for abroad, which involved the World Cup. So there was a little sports angle there, but without diving too much in the weeds, went out, started out really looking to get into sales because that was what I was told was the easiest way to break into the industry. So started out in ad sales, did that for a year, found out that wasn't really for me. Really wanted to get into like journalism or marketing. Found myself at MLB Advanced Media and video production. Did that for a full baseball season. It was a part-time job and ended up with a full-time job at the Topps Company where I was on a content creation type of role for the first year, but then I started shifting more into marketing from there. And that was really where I started to get my feet wet with digital marketing and really kind of bringing new ideas to the table and going from point A to point Z where it launches. We were able to get this pretty unique idea off the ground that wasn't really my original idea, but it was our team's. It was a real team effort called Topps Now. It was an instant baseball card program where we would turn a card around the next day after some big event happened in baseball. It was available for 24 hours at a time, and the concept really took off. In the first year, we were able to earn more revenue on that concept alone than the whole website had generated the year prior. So that was a great learning experience for me. I was in that company for about 3.5 years, decided, I wanted to do, Topps Now had kind of grown so big that it was really, my job just to maintain that. And I really kind of missed the beginning stages of that where we were, ideating and building something from the ground up, knowing that there wasn't really going to be the bandwidth for that again at Topps. I started looking outward, landed at FanDuel, where, it was interesting timing. I got there a month before we were supposed to, a month before the merger with DraftKings fell through. So that was a very interesting and unique experience in itself that only lasted about 8 months. Unfortunately, got caught up in a layoff in that situation with, new CEO coming in and, a lot of house cleaning to do after that merger fell through. So that was unfortunate, but also another great learning experience for me. Bounced around from Modell's to another startup over the next 1.5 years, but some other interesting, scenarios popped up on my radar there, which, led me eventually to looking outward again and landed at SiriusXM from there. And I'm coming up on my first year there and, hoping to stick around a little longer at this spot. And so far, it seems like it's moving in that direction and, going real well so far.
Yeah, so that's a great history. That's a lot of different career paths and things of that nature. So at SiriusXM, what is your main role? Do you have to come up with programs? What is it like?
Yeah, so it's a lot. There's no day that's the same, which I kind of enjoy. It keeps you on your toes. But essentially, the best way I can describe my role is I'm on a team that is kind of, we're actually not part of the marketing organization at SiriusXM. We're technically part of programming, but that's not to say, we actually are the marketing arm of programming. So we kind of view the channels that I work on, MLB Network Radio being one of those. I view the programming team as kind of my in-house clients, and then MLB. Technically we are the client of MLB, but still treat them as the external client. So it goes, it's a lot of different things going on at once. The bare minimum is to take the contractual assets we have in hand from our deal with MLB and leverage them the best that I can from a marketing standpoint. But it also involves going out to other leagues. We just sparked a new deal with the USL, which is a soccer league. I work on the FC channel, which is our soccer channel. So I work on 7 or 8 different sports related channels. Some involve a league sponsor, some don't. The ones that don't involve a league sponsor, there's a lot more creative freedom, but which made this idea, the MLB fan call idea, a little extra challenging to get off the ground. We had to get it cleared by MLB and all that. So it's a combination of thinking of new ideas that are outside the box, but also trying to stay within the box and leverage everything that we get through contractual obligations to the best of our ability.
Yeah, that's awesome. So for anyone who just joined, Andrew's just talking about his history and how he got to Sirius. And now that brings me to my question of how you came up with this challenge. So you're at Sirius, you've been here a year now, you've done marketing, right? You're in a marketing role. How did you actually come up with this and how did it actually get passed?
Sure, yeah. So I've always had a real big love for baseball. Kind of also really followed like minor leaguers and prospects and things of that nature. So I knew coming into the job that SiriusXM was the name, the sponsor for the Futures game, which for those of you who aren't big baseball fans, it takes place every year, 2 days before the All-Star game at the All-Star game site. It involves every, top prospect in baseball who's yet to debut in Major League Baseball. So with that in mind, I wanted to kind of bring more to that sponsorship to life. And I thought what better way to do that than to, try to find the next up and coming broadcast talent and showcase them during that game as a, play-by-play announcer. So that's kind of where the idea originated. And, what motivated me to, eventually pitch the idea. And I felt like just based on that thought process alone, that there were some serious legs to it, concept aside.
Yeah, for sure. So did you have multiple ideas before you came up with this one? Did you have to bring like 5 ideas to them? Was it just this one you were just dead set on? What was that like?
Yeah, so back in, I would say, early March, it was the first, I'd been at the company at that point for about 5 or 6 months. So felt like I had a good grasp of, everything going on and the people that were on my team and who I'd be pitching to. So, definitely had enough confidence to bring something new to the table. And when I did, I came up with 8 different ideas to pitch just to my boss. Really nothing too concrete, mostly just kind of explanatory. What I'm very appreciative about at SiriusXM is it's a very collaborative environment and not, my boss doesn't require me to go above and beyond in the first conversation. I kind of use that as a chance to gauge which thoughts and ideas are of interest to her. So I kind of took that approach, came up, presented 8 different ideas, and we selected 2. We didn't want to spread ourselves too thin, to really focus on this being one of them. The other one, unfortunately, didn't come to fruition because of the game being canceled. It was we were looking to do something fun around the Field of Dreams game, which was actually supposed to happen yesterday, but was postponed. But Yeah, so we just honed in on this MLB fan call of the month, and it'll end up being also MLB fan call of the year, but we can dive more into that too.
Nice. So you understood who your boss was. You thought that she would appreciate some of these ideas, and that's how you brainstorm most of them.
Yeah, I mean, it was
Yeah.
also kind of looking at the contract and seeing, okay, we've got all these tickets and assets for the All-Star game for ourselves, and how do we really want to use them for ourselves, or do we want to kind of use them in a marketing kind of arena? And I thought that was a no-brainer too.
Yeah, cool. So you have the idea now. What's that next step? Do you have to pitch it to a team? Do you have a team around you? Are
Yes.
you leading the charge? What's going on?
Yeah, so that's one of the things is I'm lucky to be on a team where we are sort of leading the charge on those discussions. So that's I assume the large majority of you on the call might not be in that type of position. So I'm going to try to cater my advice to that. But it is kind of part of my job description to come to the table with new ideas and things of that nature, and leading brainstorm discussions. And with that in mind, I thought it was especially important for me in the early going to reach out to people that I was going to eventually need buy-in on things like that, and just get to know them. I in my first 2 months, 3 months on the job, I took it upon myself to reach out to upwards of 20 people throughout the organization, be it from our programming staff to our social team, our promotions team, just to really, get to know who they were and see what made them tick. And I think that helped me feel way less intimidated when it came time to pitching stuff like this, and B, just helped me kind of, maybe cater the idea in a certain way to those people.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's really solid advice. I found it even when I was at Datadog networking with the upper management, it was key.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, now you have this idea, you have the team around you. What's the next step? So when did Corona happen in relation to all of this, I don't know, idea planning and all of that?
Yeah, so I had the idea in mind probably in February, but I didn't actually get to talk to my boss about it until probably the first week we were remote. Of course, then we thought we'd be back in the office in early April.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the whole thing was actually done remotely in terms of brainstorming and ideating together as a group.
So this is a pretty big plan to do remotely.
Yeah.
Yeah. How did that work out? So I think that could be some good advice too of how you efficiently did this, how you got everybody on board without having in-person meetings.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was kind of a double-edged sword in that sense. I mean, in the early going, we were in a place as a team. I focus on sports. We have a few. My team has 3 different verticals we focus on. We've got sports, we got talk, and then we've got music. So my group was really we didn't have much to do for from March to I guess all the way up through like May and June in terms of covering live sports. So I think in some ways it actually gave us more bandwidth to think of bigger picture ideas like this. That's not to say it wouldn't have happened otherwise, but I think it definitely in the early stages helped foster the growth of this. Later on, now it's kind of the flip side with sports all dropping at once. There's probably going to be more sports than ever in the month of September. So now we're the ones that are pretty spread thin, and we kind of chipped in with music and talk, picking up some of their work in the early going, but now maybe it'll be a little reverse of that.
Yeah, how long did the whole idea process take?
Well, the idea process it took about, I mean, there was a couple of stages. So first it was just my boss and I going over this. Then we have a monthly call with MLB, our points of contact over there. We wanted to make sure that these were compliant with, everything from a legality standpoint before we
How was that?
That was quite the process. More so towards the later stages than the early stages. The early stages, our deal actually technically did not give us the outright, right to do sweepstakes. So we had to make sure that we sold this through to them first, and because it was going to be marketing MLB content in this unique way, they were willing to make the exception for us. So that was a nice win early on. But as we kind of moved through the process, this was an idea that was definitely outside the box from what we've traditionally done. and it also involved footage, which is also, not something that we typically have rights to. So we had to secure a footage license, which that was the most interesting process towards the end, because we weren't completely made aware of that until just days before the launch of this thing. That was
So is that expensive? I imagine it would be for you to purchase that.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we were not planning to have a cost associated with something like that, and it was sprung upon us at a very late stage, which understandable. MLB had a lot going on, obviously, in the early stages of this. They had to figure out, whether they were going to have a season or not. So totally understand how and why it was potentially overlooked in the early going, but it did actually, we were able to knock the price down quite significantly because of that. So I think in the end, we actually got a pretty good deal.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, so all these different factors play into this whole idea, which is interesting to culminate everything. If they had never let you do this license, you wouldn't be able to do it. So it's really interesting to see how many different pieces there are to this subtly small, like it's just so, it's very plain where you just have someone submit it, but there's so much to it, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
So now that we have the idea, you've formulated it, you've worked with people, what is that final step to make it all kind of culminate together into this one, final thing where people can submit their play-by-play or their calling play? Yeah.
So once we had kind of like clearance in the early going to really push this through, I thought it would be, and I think this is good advice for people too. I thought it'd be really important, especially at a larger size company, to bring in all the people who, were going to be the executors and people in the driver's seat once this thing launched, to chip in on the idea. And I was not married. In fact, this idea was not in its current form in the very beginning. In the very beginning, I had this idea where we would do a weekly thing where we would have people actually sign up prior to each Sunday night game, and they would get to call a happening of the game itself, and we maybe like broadcast it on replay later, like the best call from our judgment. We significantly tweaked it from there with the help of our programming staff. It was important that we had their buy-in, and we also got their opinion, because they, this was their baby. It's their channel. So, I wanted to make sure the idea fit in their scope of work. We tweaked it to do so, and I think it really turned out to be a better, execution in the end. We also took some, feedback from the promotions team. They're the ones who actually own the landing page, and are in charge of the email communication and really help us, market this thing. Took some advice from the social team. So really what I did in the early stages was kind of set a framework of what we're looking to execute, not really, marrying myself to any of the minutiae or the details. And by doing so, I think by inviting people instead of instructing people, in the end, A, it helps initial buy-in, and B, it definitely probably helped us, like when it came time to executing, people were just more bought in because they had some of their own fingerprints on it.
Agreed. Yeah, getting the buy-in is super important. I think when anybody is in the process of such a planning that they have to execute, they feel like they should do a better job, or they feel like they're obligated to, because they're part of the process,
Right.
rather than spring it upon someone. So that was good intuition on your part. So it's going right now, right? Has it completed? Can you still submit? How is it going? I know it's a national campaign, which is amazing. That's really cool. I know Sirius obviously is a big name, but just to say it's a national campaign is really cool.
Yeah, we launched it last Thursday. Technically, the entry period ended yesterday at 10, so we're just reconciling all the first entries. And just for those of you who, I'm sure the majority of you haven't fully read into it, I can explain how it works. So basically, what we're going to do is what we did this past week. We selected a random play that we kind of thought would lead to a lot of originality with a play-by-play call. It was a baseball player on the San Francisco Giants who ran into a fence, made a catch, and opened the bullpen gate in doing so. So we selected a play of that nature, we embedded the video of that play onto our landing page, and we instructed people, pretend like this is a live play. record your own play-by-play audio, upload it, and copy and paste the link into your entry form. So then after the 1 week period entry, 1 week entry period ended, which was yesterday. Now we go to the judgment phase where we'll take all the entries, we'll rank the top 5, and then those 5 people are going to be invited to appear on air, on radio, to have their playback of their play-by-play on the air, and then also the judges will critique those, judge them, grade them, and one ultimate winner will advance then to the Fan Call of the Year competition in November. So we're going to have 3 of these. The next one's in September, and then of course in October. And then the 3 winners of those contests will then compete in a live competition virtually, where we're going to have some different broadcasting challenges throughout in front of our panel of judges. And the winner of that will get the grand prize, which is a trip to next year's All-Star game. Hopefully it happens, and the opportunity to call a half inning of the Futures game live on air.
That's really cool. Wow.
Sorry.
That'd be awesome. So you're literally giving opportunity to a huge baseball fan that could literally change their life if they wanted to get into broadcasting.
Yep. Yeah. I took the approach of, I wanted to. We also have a max of 50 entries, just so that our programming staff isn't too spread thin with judging and all that. So I took the approach of really reaching out to, Newhouse was my first call. I wanted to get it into the hands of those students. And I was able to get in touch with someone from Penn State, from their, communication school. And we're going to continue to target kids that are, currently broadcast journalism majors and young professionals in that field as well. But I'm currently working on trying to get our winner, whoever that may be, if he or she volunteers, to appear on MLB Network TV during the next entry period. And I think that should really give us a good boost. It was a challenge to market this thing, especially because it was such a scramble at the 11th hour, especially with that footage license thing, and with the Marlins, the whole team catching COVID, we pushed the launch back a week. It was a scramble to get it off the ground. So definitely challenging without any content produced thus far to market this thing. And now that we're through the first entry period, I think it'll be a lot, less challenging to market it with that content in hand. Yeah,
for sure. So to wrap it up a little bit, what final words of advice would you have? I know I was curious that I didn't get to answer the question on you this, but what was it like to pitch this idea to, say, Tops versus Sirius? So obviously there's a pretty big discrepancy between them both, and I was curious about that. I know we're bringing it back just a little bit, but I thought that was a big idea and question that would be important to answer.
Yeah, sure. So not apples to apples, but in the Top scenario, it was first not technically my own personal idea. It was the way that idea kind of generated was our VP had some good feedback from hardcore card collectors that they wanted a program of that type of nature, and then it was up to our team to kind of problem solve that, and we eventually collectively came up with that concept together. So outside of that aspect of it, big differences across the board. I mean, at Tops, it's much more smaller, much more focused environment. At SiriusXM, it is like, there's a ton going on. There's hundreds of channels, tons of cooks in the kitchen, and it was extra important to get early buy-in and people to contribute on this idea, because I knew down the line, and I've been going through this in the last couple of weeks, I'd be competing with a lot of other departments for the attention of those drivers, of the marketing initiatives in terms of social and email and all that. Trying to get this prioritized is definitely challenging, because SiriusXM is still a music first platform, whereas at Tops, there was nothing of that type of nature to compete with. So it was nowhere near the battle that I had to go on at SiriusXM just to get the buy-in and the attention and the excitement behind the idea. At Tops, it was also I was also able to be in that driver's seat. I was the one actually managing the website. I was the one actually pushing send on our email marketing campaigns. I sat right next to the social person. I sat right next to the art director. At SiriusXM, it's it takes a lot more planning, a lot more advanced thought process and thinking ahead, and managing a lot of different opinions and contingency plans and legalities. So a lot more planning goes into an idea at a larger organization like SiriusXM than it did at Tops, and it's also there's some pain points too when it comes to executing. I can't. A lot of people at SiriusXM, a lot of departments at SiriusXM are, they're territorial over their departments. They don't really want you to get in the weeds of their job, even if they're spread thin and you offer to, hey, like, can I get the login of this, website so I can pull a report? The answer is no. At Sirius and at Tops, I could basically, do stuff as I pleased on the fly. So that's been definitely a big adjustment for me, but it's been a good learning experience too.
Yeah, for sure. Both have pros and cons, for sure. So now that it's in full swing, how do you think the whole process went off? Are you proud? How do you feel? Are there any things that you wish you could have done differently?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm overall pretty satisfied. I'm not sure, I haven't gotten the chance to see the real results yet. But I think the only thing I wish we could have done a little better was, I think the user experience isn't perfect. It's a little bit, there's a lot to it. You got to watch the play, record your play-by-play, upload to SoundCloud, copy, paste your link into an entry form. So it would be ideal if we had a better, user experience from that standpoint. But again, this is a very new and outside the box idea for us. So something for us to, build on over time. And my hope is that this is a campaign that we continue running year in and year out. I think, if it wasn't for COVID, my big idea with the Fan Call of the Year contest was to actually have it be a live event at a broadcast journalism school where we do the contest first. And we typically do these things called town halls where, it usually involves an athlete and a small intimate audience of maybe 50 to 100 people. And it's, hosted by a well-known person in either radio or TV or so I wanted to do a real broadcasting like town hall with some cool like guest judges and things of that nature. So that's another thing that we obviously won't be able to do this year. We're going to try to do it virtually, I think, but yeah, I mean, so far first week's in the books, and I'm excited to see if, how this thing grows over time. I think with the first contest done and some actual content to work with and market, I expect more entries in the next one.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, I'll open it up to the rest of the chat if you have any questions.
So at this point, we've had a few awesome questions embedded in the chat, so I want to make sure we hit those before we go to live questions. Sam asked, how do you verify the authenticity of a recording or a voice? What's stopping me from using a voice changer?
A good question. I'll be honest, we haven't thought about that one yet. You're saying, I guess, if you made your voice sound deeper or something of that nature, I guess. I guess.
Sorry, did I mute? Can I? Sorry, did I?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Go ahead, Sam.
No, I mean, like, if I have my sister sing for me, who has a super awesome voice, and I have a shitty voice, like, how do you know it's the same person, right? Especially with, like, you could have, like, the Bluetooth connected where she's singing right next to me, but the recording make it, there's just so many ways.
Yeah. Well, we will be inviting the people on later, and I think that we communicate that. So, if they want to take the risk and then sound much different later, I think we'll probably pick up on that, and then they wouldn't actually end up winning the award. They might make it to the finalist round, but that's a good question. And one of the things that I haven't touched on yet is it's really important to think of all these different scenarios up front and what questions are going to be asked of you in the brainstorming stage, and be prepared for those answers. And quite frankly, that was not one that I thought of. So that's I appreciate you bringing that up. But I would say our best answer would be that we would probably vet them during the finalist round, and if it didn't stack up, they just wouldn't advance to winning.
Absolutely. And that's definitely something I didn't think about either. So that's a really good call. Hannah asked, how do you plan on capturing lessons learned from the first year of the contest?
Yeah, I mean, I think I already have a few lessons learned. I think we need to, tweak the landing page a little bit. We actually saw in the early going that there was a decent amount of entries that were not qualified in any way. And what I mean by that is they just like wrote something in like they were almost like doing their fan call in writing form instead of uploading the link and following the instructions. So I think we need to reorder a few things on the landing page, and I would have probably wanted to do that over the course of last week. But again, I don't have the you know, the clearance to go in and do that. I have to seek permission from someone else. And with all the competing things, I just didn't want to bother the team. And I figured we'd wait the first week and then tackle the second one with that in mind. So, but beyond that, I think it'll be interesting because in future years, we do want to do this in a live, we want to cap it off in a live setting, as I kind of mapped out before. So I think we also kind of want to look for a sponsor next season, and I thought we would use this year. We weren't able to secure one, which wasn't too surprised by that given the way this thing played out. But I think by launching it in a kind of bite-sized half season, it gives us a great opportunity to kind of use that as a proof of concept from our standpoint. Does this work? How do we improve upon it? But also B, it's going to allow us to now showcase it and seek a sponsor with some more tangible legs to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And personally, I was wondering, in such a collaborative job where you tend to talk to each other to craft big ideas, what sort of brainstorming tips do you have for people who are working at home?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most important things that I've probably struggled with earlier in my career and still do here and there is you got to try to keep it simple in the upfront stage. You want to define what your goals are and make sure that the ROI is well defined for everybody as well, especially if there's a lot of work to be done. But I think I'll go back to what I said earlier and say you definitely want to be inviting and not, instructing. And I think it's important not to, be tied to the way you've originally mapped it out to be. I think especially in my role as a newer employee, I really wanted to lean on a lot of the more seasoned people within the company who have a better perspective on things than I do. So I think it's important to know who you are. It's important to know your internal audience as much as your consumers. You got to know who you're pitching to, and kind of be amenable to their feedback, especially as a newer person like in my shoes.
John's question was how to handle a big idea that doesn't necessarily fall within the purview of your job. If you have an awesome idea and you present it to people and they say, oh, that's not really what you do here, how do you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely a challenge that I've had not too much experience with, but I think it's it depends what type of organization you're in. And I think that, it also depends on the type of boss you have. So I think having a good pulse on that before you go about pitching it is important. But, it's actually not a situation I've had much experience in. That's not to say, I can't speak to it. I think that you just got to, find out who the people are that are in the group that typically have that type of job, and maybe try to set up some time, grab lunch with those folks, figure out is this something that I should drive, or is this something that you should drive? And I think it's okay to not necessarily hand it off to somebody, but try to get the people who are able to have the decision making power on board and let them kind of drive with you in the passenger seat almost. That would be my best advice in that situation, I think.
Absolutely, that's a really good idea. And to transition a little bit away from actually presenting the big idea into maintaining the big idea, do you find that there's added pressure when it's an idea that you've created?
Yes. And that's part of what's very important in the early stages. I think two things I haven't really spoken to yet. Well, one, I'll get back to that. I think I got interrupted when you were asking about when people say no. But first, it's really important to be self-critical before you approach anybody at the company. I think you got to assess first, like, one of the most important aspects is before you even start thinking of an idea, what are the biggest problem areas of your company, and what are some low-hanging fruit opportunities that you can, pitch an idea around. So I think starting with that, you'll be able to hone in on the right area of the organization or the right, idea to sprout. And then before you take it to your boss, put yourself in their shoes, or in the audience's shoes. What questions are they going to ask you? What are the risks? Try to poke as many holes in your own idea and be as objective about it as you can. I think the biggest mistake, I personally made in earlier in my career was, getting really excited about an idea or thought and not thinking about all the potential pitfalls to it. The last thing you want to do is launch an idea that gets your company into trouble, or just spreads your team too thin and doesn't, return enough on that time investment. So, I think it's important to just consider every obstacle in front of you and then have an answer prepared for when those questions arise. Because if you can't answer the question to yourself up front, then I think it's time to re-examine the idea and, reshape it or move on to the next idea.
And then to go back on touching on when people say no.
Yes. So I was saying before, one of my biggest pet peeves is if somebody, regardless of what their role is in the organization, bluntly says no. And I mean that by saying there's no reasoning, there's nothing beyond that. I haven't encountered that too much in my career, but the first thing is you got to ask why, and you shouldn't do it in a pushy way if you're not, in upper management, so to speak. I think what you can do is, one thing I've kind of done when I pitch ideas, at least in the early going of my time at SiriusXM, is, I want to use it as a learning experience too. So, without, wasting anyone's time, if it's an idea that's, not realistic, okay, like what's the reasoning? I want to know that, so that when I think of my next idea, I have this new perspective in mind that you're shedding upon. So I think it's important to not just, don't get defeated if it's a no. I think you can still have a nice personal win on your side by just taking the initiative to go to the table and pitch takes a lot of guts, especially if it's not in the job description, so to speak. So I think by doing that and coming prepared already is a big accomplishment in the eyes of those who you're pitching to. But just as important for your own learning, you got to understand what the reason is, and then if you don't agree with the reason, don't be afraid to defend your idea. Tell them, okay, like, I understand that, but I've actually thought of that, and here's X, Y, and Z why I think it's not an issue.
So in the chat, both John and Kaylee are agreeing on what I think is a really important aspect of pitching a good idea, which is knowing the audience you're pitching to. Do you have different sets of pitches for the same idea depending on who you're talking to?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's yes and no. I think it's, as long as the idea stays consistent and in terms of the important details, I would say I focus on different things with different groups. So if I'm talking with the social team, we're focused on the content marketing side of it. If I'm talking to the promotions team, we're focused on making sure all the rules and all the user experience functions are in place. If I'm talking to the programming team, in this instance, I'm making sure we're not spreading them too thin with the judging phase, and that we've got the right dynamic in terms of the judgment on air phase and things of that nature. So I think the idea needs to stay the same in terms of the way it's going to be brought to life, but I think it is important, if you're not having an all-encompassing conversation, if you're talking with different groups about it, to definitely cater the focus to that area.
And Kaylee's asking specifically about in the startup phase of the project, when you're just beginning to pitch it, do you need to cater it a little bit more specifically in that case?
You're saying to each different group in the audience, like the different departments?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think this one, I tried to get everybody in one room in the early stages, kind of set the tone of, what the goals were as a group. But there have been a lot of individual conversations with each group as we've gone. And yeah, I mean, I've taken the same relative approach in terms of just being open-minded to, incorporating their ideas and ways we can, do this to the best of our abilities. I think, with those people, they have a much more intimate, perspective in the landscape that they live. So, in terms of the, social aspect of it, I handed it off to that team for drafting copy. And, in terms of the creative team, like, building graphics, I set the brief, but I try to stay out, I don't want to have too many hands on the iron at once. I try to, do my best to delegate in that sense. But, it is outside of my prior experience delegating on this level. So it's definitely been a good learning experience for me in that nature.
Absolutely. And to give your voice a break for 1 minute, I'd actually love Chris to expand upon his comment.
Okay, thanks, Cooper. Yeah, thanks for everything so far, Andrew. Yeah, sometimes you might have a great idea, and maybe this is especially applicable if you're a little younger, in your job or your career. You can, you feel like it's a good idea. Everything's led you to that point, and maybe you're presenting it to somebody with more experience or upper management, and they're like, oh, okay, maybe it doesn't take right away. But I found that it's important. Like, it doesn't mean it's a bad idea. You kind of you sort of have to wait, and then the work becomes more like reading people a little bit and waiting for an opportunity later to open up. For instance, someone you're originally pitching to they've got a million other things on their mind, and they don't, your idea is 5% of what they're thinking about that day. Meanwhile, for you, it's 95% of your day. So, you can kind of wait. Maybe someone else will come into the company later, and like as they're getting settled, you could look really helpful by saying like, oh, hey, I've been trying to get this thing off the ground. Maybe this would help you if you just present it to them later, and then it could just take later. You could think, it's like good to just sort of have a stable of ideas or things you want to implement kind of ready to go, and then you wait, and you have to listen to people to see what it is they might want, and wait for that to line up with something you have in the back of your head. I found that works pretty well, and that's definitely a long game thing. That's not a impress on your first day thing. But
I've been there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So once again, if anyone has live questions, you're more than welcome to jump in, but I have more questions, so I'm going to keep going because you're a very interesting person. Do you think that intrinsically people are either idea people or not idea people, or is this a muscle that you can train?
It's a good question. I really, I think it can be trained, but I also really think a lot of it just comes from, your level of passion and energy for the subject matter. Like, personally speaking, I think I was born with this passion for sports, and I've been following it since, my mother told me that she has a story where I was in a stroller at the age of, 2 weeks, and I was, intently viewing this soccer game in a park. And I've always kind of had this big passion for sports, and pursued a career that was in that field. And because of, my upbringing and just like general knowledge of that subject matter, it's really empowered me to have the energy and thought process to cater to that. So I think that's a big component is, are you in the field that you're really passionate about? Not everybody's fortunate to be in that position. So I think if I wasn't in sports, it would definitely be a more, uphill battle to flex that muscle. But, to that point, I think there's a lot of resources out there to learn more about your vertical. And I think if you're in if you're in a job like that, it's probably important to do that. So just, I think if you read and do a lot of research in the subject matter itself, that alone, I've found that when I read, I actually sometimes just start sprouting ideas, while I'm reading. So I think just by taking a deeper look into the subject matter and taking a passion for it is a nice first step in terms of training that muscle. But yeah, I think a lot of it just kind of depends on what environment you're in, what field you're in, and what level of passion and energy you have for that subject matter.
So I have a question. I'm really interested in company culture, and I've been reading a lot recently on how shame and vulnerability and the ability of leaders to kind of expose that to the rest of their team has a pretty heavy impact on innovation. I work on an innovation team, so specifically interested. Have you had experience within different companies and pitching ideas kind of in those different cultures, and had any experience where if a leader has kind of been more willing to be vulnerable, or failures have been met with feedback instead of criticism? Just wondering if you can maybe speak to that and kind of the different experiences you've had in the different cultures.
Yeah. I mean, I've had a lot of different experiences over the last 5 years, and a lot of different bosses. Every one of them has been distinctly different. And my first boss, well, not my first boss, the first boss I have in mind with this subject was a Tops, and he operated much differently than my current boss. He did not want me to come into his office and just, sprout a thought and say, take his temperature on it. He preferred me being extremely buttoned up and coming in with like a fully fleshed out plan. And, in my opinion at the time, I thought, okay, like I'd love to do that, but I just don't have the time or the resources because I'm juggling so much with this job. And if it doesn't go anywhere, if he's not interested in even the the thought, that's a lot of work and time to be putting in. So that kind of served to discourage me a little bit. And he, not to speak too negatively, but he was the type of guy that like you had to cater the idea to the point where he could claim it as his own. And it's, you got to understand the different personalities you're working with. If you have a boss that wants to be the person who gets credit for the idea, that's unfortunate, and it might stunt your growth of the company, but you should still pursue it because it's going to help you in your career. I think with the Tops Now idea, there was a lot of stuff that I had personally come up with within the the framework of the idea that wasn't recognized later on, and I think it sort of served to put a little strain on my relationship with him. But he I think it's important to still push the idea forward, and if you have to cater it in a way where it turns into your boss idea, so be it. I think with my current arrangement, it's like it's really a team environment. It's very collaborative, and I'm much more invested in I enjoy celebrating success with a team as opposed to beating my chest and all that. So I think that you got to understand who your boss is, what your audience is, and try to cater the idea in that sense. And I think it's always important to get the buy-in and to be inviting in that sense with upper management, because you want them to champion this idea at the end of the day. There's a lot of instances where I'll ask someone from another department to do something for us with the idea. There's some reluctance or hesitation, but if my boss says the exact same thing, they get right on it. So it's very important to get your superiors on board and bought in so that they can really plow when it comes down to the execution stage and get people on board in that sense.
Absolutely. And as it is 7:56 and people are beginning to drop off, one, I want to direct your attention to the chat where Nicole dropped our poll. We really value your feedback. And two, I want to throw it over to Linda for some future programming announcements.
Thank you, Andrew. A couple things. First of all, the way that I met Andrew was doing an internship working a summer at Yankee Stadium a long time ago. I don't know, Andrew, must have been 9 years ago, 10?
Oh, it was longer than that. I think it was 13 years.
Okay. So the power of networking. Happened to walk up to him. It was when they were selling the chairs and the seats in Yankee Stadium. Struck up a conversation, found out he went to Syracuse, said, you got to enroll in the DLE, and earned a scholarship, and we've kept in touch ever since. So the power of networking, I love it. And he's got a great story to share with everyone. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your ideas.
Absolutely. And again, I want to extend my thanks, Andrew.